John goes on to say, no one who sins has either seen him or truly known him. Now that sounds pretty harsh, doesn't it? Because some of us have surely seen and known him and yet have slipped back into sin. But if you understand the focus of the now, what she means is if you sin in the now, you're not related to Jesus at all in that moment. Because if you were related to him in that moment, you wouldn't do it. I grew up a PK. I don't know the equivalent that you might use. It can be translated for two things. Parsonage kid or preacher's kid, because preachers live in parsonages. Some people focus on the preacher, some focus on the parson. And because I grew up as a PK, oftentimes I was reminded that I should be calling on Jesus. You're the pastor's son, how can you act like that? Right? I was yanked into the present by others who reminded me of who I was. And that's what John did. Before he talked about this abiding in Jesus, he said, we are God's children now. Remember who you are. You are God's child. Jesus is your brother. In fact, closer than your brother. So, when you think about it, if we choose to sin, we've basically shut out Jesus. My father used to tell the story about when he was a boy, very early. When he was 10 years old, my father knew he was going to be a pastor. And he grew up in a Christian, in a Methodist home. And everybody knew, so much so that when he was on the playground, sometimes a group of boys would be together and he'd start to come over. They'd say, "Oh, Paul, this isn't for a preacher's ears." Or telling off-color stories or something, you know? And that's the kind of thing we need to understand, that in essence, if we choose to sin, we're saying to Jesus, "Oh, Jesus, you just stay here for a minute. I got to go over here and do my own thing." You understand what I'm saying? Because Jesus is with us and walks with us unless we push him away. Now, the problem is, we don't think of this process as a conscious process, do we? We don't think either of consciously pushing Jesus away, or for that matter, of consciously calling Jesus to our aid. But we need to. That's what it means to focus in the now, and to truly abide in the moment in Jesus. This is why Paul talks about some things. He talks particularly about how that if we are in the Lord and we sin, we involve the Lord in sin. Now there are lots of things that we know we need to overcome in our lives. But the common thing we do is, rather than ask Jesus to help us overcome, is we ask Jesus, consciously or unconsciously, to leave us alone for a little bit. And then, maybe we ask for forgiveness after the fact. Or, maybe we plan to ask for forgiveness. You hear that? See, if you move the focus from the now to the future, oh, and I'm going to go ahead and do this, but I know God is good, and I know God will, forgive me if I ask, so I'll plan after I've done my thing to ask for forgiveness. But planning to ask for forgiveness doesn't help us overcome sin, does it? Let's do this again. Hands up. Alright? Ready? Bring them together. even after the moment of impact, for a little while there are vibrations in the air, aren't there? You see, what we do doesn't just impact the moment, it continues to reverberate. Or to put it another way, I think a lot of people misunderstand this verse. You reap what you sow. See, some people think that means God plans to punish you. I don't think that's what it means at all. I think it means that God knows there are consequences to our actions. God can do anything. But God doesn't choose to stop the that word's hard to get out. Reverberations of claps or words. There's a mythological character in American folklore, and what's his name now? Help me out. Paul Bunyan. Any of you know about Paul Bunyan? He was a woodsman, you know, a big burly man, and supposedly somewhere, I think, in the mid-north country. And one of the stories about him was that it was so cold that when he spoke, his words would freeze. So that he couldn't say, "Oh, I never said that," because there was the frozen evidence of what had already come out of his mouth. Sometimes we might like to think that what we've done leaves no evidence. But I want you to consider the possibility that even when God wishes that you didn't have to reap what you sowed, that in the normal course of events, God doesn't intervene except to guarantee us that in His love we have an ultimate destiny